should be seeing my screen now. I think you will be. Tell me if you are. Or give me a big thumbs up if you are. I see heads nodding. Okay, great. All right, so this is Barbershop in Our Changing World, and I'm going to move through some of the initial slides fairly quickly because they're not as relevant in this setting. Some information about the class itself, the objectives, participant expectations, a little bit about me you already know. Here's a smattering of the agenda that we'll cover during this class. A couple of logistics things, just so you know, as I mentioned, the class is 90 minutes with no intended breaks, although Lisa, if you'd prefer, we could try to take a break at the 45-minute mark. Since we have more than 90 minutes available to us, it's okay for us to take breaks if the chorus wants or needs. If you have things that make noise, please turn them off. Although obviously if you're muted, that's less of an issue. Feel free to ask me questions at any time. Now I'll defer to Lisa on this if she'd prefer to have people just speak up when they have a question or maybe put it into the chat. But I'm comfortable taking questions throughout the class. And if you raise a question for a topic I'm going to cover later on, I'll just let you know, hey, I'm going to cover that in a little bit. We'll come back to it. But I'm very comfortable being interrupted if she's okay with that.
Thank you, Chris. That's worked.
Okay. No need to post about this on social media necessarily. If we were at HU, we'd want people to talk about it a lot. In this case, the class is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again after the fact. And this is perhaps one of the most important points. The slides that I'm going to present today and all the information associated with them, this particular class doesn't have any videos, but some of my classes do. All of that material is available for download at any time from a Google Drive link that I will provide. So you don't necessarily need to feel like you have to take a lot of notes during this class if you're just trying to capture the information that you're seeing on screen, because you're going to have access to it again after the fact. All right, so let's do a quick demographics, and I'm going to have to switch to gallery view so I can see some hands raised here. Well, actually, that may or may not work while I'm sharing my screen, but I'll do my best. Maybe Lisa can address some of these questions for me. Obviously, most of you are probably not in BHS or HI, so we'll skip that question. But how many of you have been in Barbershop, let's say 20 years or less? What portion of the chorus has less tenure, if you will, in Barbershop? And Lisa, I'm afraid I can't see everybody, so you might have to try to give me a sense for, is it 50% of the chorus? Is it 25%? What's a rough number?
That have how many? Sorry, less than 10?
Well, let's say less than 20. We'll divide it a little bit more coarsely. So anybody with 20 years or less in Barbershop, put your hand up, and Lisa can just get a quick sense for how many that is.
I have to also change my view. There we go. Keep them up. That was less than 10 years? Okay.
Less than 20.
Less than 20, okay.
Yeah. So what are you seeing on your screen, Lisa? Maybe half the membership, less than half?
About half, maybe, yeah, 10, 12.
Okay.
A third.
All right. So of those in attendance today, perhaps, yeah, perhaps as much as 50%, but let's say a third of your membership is 20 years or less. So that obviously means everybody else is 20 years or more. 20 years is an interesting and good dividing line these days, because it means you probably entered Barbershop around the year 2000. There have been, especially in the SAI world, there's been meaningful changes in scoring, in sort of judge expectations around contest. Obviously, as a chorus that goes to contest, you've seen and heard about the evolution of the scoring system over time. But for someone who's been with Barbershop for, let's say, 40 or 50 years, they've seen some pretty dramatic changes over time, and they may or may not be as comfortable with how Barbershop and the Barbershop world has evolved versus those who've been here, let's say, 20 years or less, and have seen, frankly, less evolution because some changes had arrived before they joined Barbershop. How many people in the chapter fill an administrative leadership role and or a music team leadership role?
That would be a large number.
A large number, yes. Not surprising for a chorus of your size. Okay, and we'll skip the Harmony College question because that's irrelevant. All right, let me continue on here. All right, so we've got an emergency in Barbershop, in the Barbershop world. Now, some of my slides here provide data specific to BHS, but I've spoken to folks at SAI and HI, and they've seen equivalent patterns emerging. So this data is indicative of a problem that we have more generally in barbershop. So in BHS, as an example, we saw a significant decline in membership since 2005. That trend, these slides were made, probably 3 years ago now. Originally, that trend has continued. BHS as an organization seems to be holding steady now. I'm going to guess around 18,000 members-ish, but it's not going to be able to hold steady for long. And this is because the average age of a BHS member, and this is true in SA as well, the average age is, for the most part, senior citizens. Nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that they're not going to be members forever. And we're not replacing our aging membership with younger members. And when we do, we have a very difficult problem around retention. Certainly in BHS, I think this is equally true in SAI, that we have a tendency to bring in new people. We excite them with a program intended to get new members into the chorus, but we have a difficult time retaining them over an extended period of time. So they get introduced to barbershop, but they may not stick around. As you can imagine, this creates a trend that is downward instead of upward with respect to the number of people barbershopping and the number of people in each of our choruses. So how did we get here? Well, the world changed, but barbershop, frankly, really didn't adapt to those changes. So let's talk first about societal changes that have happened. And this is since 1945, and in particular over the last 50 years or so, since about 1970. We've seen some pretty dramatic changes in the way that people live. We have suburbs developed. We moved from a more rural setting in most states and provinces in North America to urban city living. There's less opportunity for, and frankly, less interest in perhaps getting to know your neighbors. So the relationships that we have with other people have decreased over time. There's a vocational class balance that's happened. We've had a shift from agricultural and manufacturing work to knowledge and service worker industries. And that's really flattened what we think of as the hierarchies that exist in the business world. Back in the, let's say the 1950s, 60s, 70s, for the most part, you had a worker and you had a manager and you had a boss and you didn't talk back and you did what you were told. And now, especially if you look in my industry, for example, in the software industry, the hierarchical levels are sort of irrelevant. Whoever has the best idea wins. It's a meritocracy instead of, things like tenure are far less relevant in my industry, for example, and in many industries now. There's the speed up of everyday life. It's true for most people these days that you no longer work 9 to 5. You don't leave the office at 5 o'clock, come home and forget about your job until the next day. Many people are still dealing with work issues into the evening or on the weekends. In the case of my industry, I might answer a work email at 2 a.m. just because I happen to be awake and I see it and I just deal with it. And so there's a blending, if you will, of our private lives and our work lives that wasn't true more than 50 years ago. Of course, with electronic media now, the speed and availability of information is much greater than it was before. And our entertainment choices as a part of that have dramatically increased. If you were to think back to the 1950s, 60s, for the most part, when we had 3 TV stations and a few radio stations, you had very few entertainment choices and people tended to create their own entertainment. As a result, music at home was a big part of many people's lives. That's now gone away. I have 1,000 channels to choose from, and I've got video games, and I've got so many other ways that I can spend my free time that the appeal of choral singing with other people singing in a group has drifted away as a way to spend time. As well, there are generational changes that are impacting barbershop. So this is an oversimplification, but it works for our illustration here. Basically, there are 5 generations alive today. And this kind of divides them up. We've got what used to be referred to as the greatest generation. We now call them traditionals. These are people born before 1945. We've got baby boomers, which is roughly a 15-year span from 1960 and earlier. Excuse me. Some people take it to 1964, but I simplified here. We've got Generation X. That's the generation I belong to. So that would be people that are up to about age 56, 57 today. Generation Y, and then I lump together the Zs and all the others basically as millennials, anybody born after 95. And the reason for these groups is that there are similarities within people within a certain generation with respect to how they communicate, their interests in certain things, how they behave, etc. So let's talk about our traditionals. These are folks who generally are age 75 and up. They've grown up in times of scarcity. They either lived through the Great Depression if they're significantly older, or through World War II, for example. They heard about it from their parents. And as a result, they're accustomed to banding together for survival. They believe in hard work, dedication, sacrifice for the greater good, for the community, for their families, etc. They grew up in a time when people in North America had much more time than money. And as a result, they tended to make their own entertainment. These were the folks who grew up with the piano in the parlor, in the living room, right? And everybody gathered around it each evening to sing songs. Mom or dad would pull out a guitar and play music, whatever. They sang everywhere and for every occasion. None of us are probably old enough to remember this, but there were times when people would sing in movie theaters before the newsreel would come on, before the black and white film would come on. That was a commonplace activity back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. And they tend to be very frugal. They're penny pinchers. This is why when the society says, we're going to raise your annual dues by $5 a year, this group of people freaks out. Because to them, $5 a year, even if they have the financial means, still feels like a huge amount of money. It may or may not be, but it feels like a huge amount of money. They have grown up with and worked in organizations and environments that have a hierarchical type of leadership structure. So often, in the case of men, in some cases females as well, they've served in the military or they have family members who served. They tend to be strongly patriotic, have a high respect for authority. They worked in those situations where, as I described before, there was a worker and a manager and a boss, and you didn't talk back and you did what you were told, and they must be the manager or the boss because they're smarter than you or they're better than you, or in some cases maybe it was nepotism or whatever. But the point is that there was a structure to the way that they lived, a structure to the way that they were accustomed to working. Titles tended to be important to this group. I jokingly say that if you go to Men's International, you'll see a bunch of traditionals walking around with 47 ribbons on their chest, because they want you to know every accomplishment they've ever had in their life, because this is what they grew up with. This is what's important to them. Often they've come from an agricultural or a manufacturing background, and they lived during a time when people tended to have one job for their entire life. They didn't switch careers or switch employers, and there was a level of sort of respect and expectation that you took care of the company takes care of you. This was, the era when we used to have a lot of companies that still had, for example, lifetime pensions and whatnot. Pretty much gone these days, at least in the US, maybe less so in Canada. But absent a union these days, you're not going to find a lifetime pension in any industry. And most of these families had a working father and a stay-at-home mother. For these folks, predominantly, what we refer to as affiliation is important. That's the desire to be together with other people that are similar to them. So they like the shared history, they like the shared beliefs, they like the shared values, etc. It is this group of people that brought to rise the heyday of fraternal and sororital organizations. So when we think about groups like the Eagles and the Shriners and all the other predominantly male, admittedly, fraternal organizations, these organizations were born out of the people of this generation. Even Barbershop, if we think back to 1938 and O.C. Cash and the Guys on the Roof, that was effectively a group of people who came together around a shared interest and a shared set of values related to that interest. So Barbershop in its origins was founded by folks like this. They tend to be past oriented and history absorbed. Well, I remember when it was like this, and the old days were better, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, younger generations can be pretty dramatically different. Boomers tend to sit on the fence. So sometimes they can skew more toward the values of and the orientation of a traditional. It depends a lot on how close they were to their parents and how their parents raised them, the environment in which they were raised, or they can skew more like the Gen Xers and the youngers. But here's some considerations for these groups. Obviously, they're age 75 or less. And what I'm going to tell you is particularly true for those 55 and younger, which is your Gen X's and younger. We've grown up in times of plenty. We have 24/7 access to everything. If I want a candy bar at 2 a.m., I can run down the street and there's a store open and I can get it. That just wasn't true more than 50 years ago, maybe not even more than 40 years ago. Right? We don't write checks for anything anymore. We use cards to pay for everything. We live in a world that moves much, much faster and in which technology tends to be a key part or component of our lives and our lifestyles. We come from generations that have been told to work smarter, not harder. That breaking your back, slaving over mechanical machinery and, on a manual labor job is not a smart way to work. Instead, let's invent a solution that reduces the manual labor. Let's design technology that can make that job, if you will, or that physical labor effort unnecessary and replace it with a robot or a machine. We've also grown up, and this is especially true when you get to Gen Y and younger, we've grown up during an era where we have more money than time. And this is pretty critical to think about when we think about Barbershop and trying to attract people to our courses, our chapters. Most studies say that since 1970, the amount of free time that the average adult has in, let's say, a two-parent household has been reduced by 37 to 40%. That because of that intrusion of work into our personal lives, because of the nature of the work that we do, because of the activities that our children are now involved in, where they need to be driven to soccer practice, driven to this, driven to that, whatever, driven to hockey in the case of Canada, right? Or curling, if you're a fan like me. But the point is that for adults in these younger generations, there's far less free time available. At the same time, we have a million entertainment choices. So I now have to decide, do I want to spend my time singing Barbershop or being entertained in other ways, playing Xbox, doing whatever it is I might do? These generations tend to be willing to spend their money on things that they care about, especially if it saves them time. So this explains the rise of, for example, food delivery services, or send me a meal in a box for the next 7 days and then send me another one another week, things like that. The reason those sorts of services are successful is because people in these younger generations are willing to give up money to save time, because time has become the premium now. And because time is such a critical resource, anything that they're going to do, any hobby they're going to take up, Barbershop or otherwise, has to be balanced against, well, I've got work to do, and that takes up 60 hours a week. I got to sleep. I got my family. I got my kids. I got all these other things that I have to get done or that I care very much about. What little slice of time I have left, am I going to devote that to Barbershop? So we have to find a way to make Barbershop meaningful to that person. It can't just be a casual, oh, I'm going to go sing and sort of have some fun, and then I'm going to eventually leave because I just can't devote the time to it, right? We have to put the meaning, if you will, into their Barbershop experience. They expect, and in general, work in their work environments have participatory leadership situations. So you might be in a room with 20 people, and it doesn't matter that the CEO is there, the president or the head of the company is in the room, and the lowliest or lowest employee is in the room. If that employee comes up with a great idea, it's the idea that gets followed by the company. It's very much a meritocracy. They tend to have less respect for authority. This is born in part out of 50 years of government, finance, etc., corruption that has essentially told them, look, you can do almost anything and get away with it, right? You're just not going to get punished. And so they've seen so much of that they have they no longer believe in those institutions that had far greater respect, let's say in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s into the 60s. They tend to be knowledge or service workers, and they tend to change employers and careers fairly easily. Just speaking for myself, if I were to look at my LinkedIn profile, for example, I've probably had, I don't know, a dozen employers in the last 20 years, maybe more than that. Some were my own, some were not, but that's just the nature of the tech industry in which I work. Often they are risk takers, and there's a perception by older generations often, especially as you skew toward the younger people, that someone in their early 20s, they're slackers, that they're lazy. But that's not really the case. Most studies show that younger people are actually far more productive than earlier generations, and that productivity comes from their ability to better use technology tools to produce greater results for a company with less effort, etc. But they appear to be slackers because they require a different set of, or often require a different set of motivations, a different way of managing them in the workforce to get them excited about the role that they're going to play, or the task that they need to complete. For the most part, they're multicultural. They've been raised with equality. They have little patience for bigotry, and they tend to skew far less religious. And the younger you go, the more this is true. And often they've grown up in households where both parents have been working, and as a result, they had to be more self-reliant. In the 1970s, when I was a kid, in my pre-high school years, we referred to that as latchkey kids, the ones that would come home on their own and let themselves into the house and not see a parent until dinner time. For these younger generations, achievement is important. Now, I want to differentiate achievement from competition wins. I don't necessarily mean competition wins when I talk about achievement. What I mean by this is that they do form bonds, relationships with other people, but often those bonds have value to them around the context of a shared goal or a shared accomplishment. Instead of saying, hey, let's hang out together because we're all from Sweden, they will instead say, hey, let's hang out together because we all want to climb this mountain, or we all want to do this thing, or we all have this common shared interest about which we'd like to be, reasonably capable and good at. And so their friendships tend to orient around those common shared interests, those common shared goals, and less so around the, we're all from Germany, or we're all this, or we all grew up in the same town, whatever it might be. Their friendships have no geographic boundaries. Two people who've never met face-to-face, but who have interacted over the internet, in their teen years, could be the best of friends, as close as you might have been to the person you grew up next door to. And from an emotional perspective, that's just as strong for them as your tie is to the friends you grew up with. Because they've grown up in this world of 24/7 access to everything and sort of instant gratification, if you will, they have less patience for slow progress. And it can come across occasionally as a sort of a "what have you done for me lately" attitude. We see this when younger people go, let's say, to an international contest, and they're introduced to a champion from 20 years ago. And they're like, oh yeah, okay, that's great, but what did you do in the last 5 years, right? Could you still compete at that level today? Is your achievement from 20 years ago, were you truly as good a singer 20 years ago as the people who are singing today, for example, right? And so that can come across as somewhat cavalier or uncaring. That's not really the way they mean it. It's just that they tend to have a shorter, narrower, more recent focus in their lives around accomplishment, around goals, etc. And they value individual rewards, but perhaps more importantly, they want to have an opportunity to contribute to the final product, whatever it means. And this goes back to what I was saying higher in the slide about participatory leadership. If you're trying to attract younger generations into your chapter and you're not giving them an opportunity to contribute to what the chapter is, not just, okay, we need a secretary and you're good at taking notes so you can have that job, but actually giving them a voice in what the chapter is and what it wants to be, then they're going to be less interested because they're not getting to participate in the shaping of the thing, the shaping of the goal. All right. So let's talk about what some of the impacts of these changes are. Well, first of all, what I've just described affects every nonprofit in North America. It's not just Barbershop that's being hit by this. If you look at in-person volunteerism over the last 50 years among nonprofits, you'll find that the volunteerism as well as the membership have fallen dramatically. What has replaced it is cash giving. We find now that for a lot of, and even cash as a replacement for goods, right? When offered the opportunity at work, let's say they're doing a giving tree or some sort of exercise at work, and they say, okay, we're gonna get together a whole bunch of clothing for the needy at the holidays. Why don't you run out to the store and buy some jackets and donate them? And a lot of people, especially younger people, say, well, can I just give money instead? Because I don't have time to go to the store, right? So even patterns of giving have changed because of this 50 years of societal and generational change that we've seen. Music, as a part of this, has lost its importance in North American society. It's been replaced by other forms of entertainment. As we know, it's not included in many school programs. This is more true in the States than in Canada, but even there as well. You might wonder, why are the Swedes so successful at Barbershop? And one of the components of the reason for their success is that in Sweden, everybody does music from the time they enter school until the time they leave high school. And a whole lot of people continue to do music in their college years as in the form of essentially a minor degree. So they have far greater participation in music as a lifestyle than we do in North America. They've retained that as a cultural thing that they care about, and so they continue to emphasize it as a larger part of just sort of the arts in school. And so there's a reason that they can find hundreds of great singers to get into choruses all across Sweden, not just Barbershop, but like if you look at Stockholm, a city of, what is it, 2.5, 3 million total people, they have over 100 registered choruses there and a few hundred more unregistered choruses. Again, not just Barbershop, but the point is everybody sings. Everybody sings everywhere in Sweden because for them, it's continued to be a piece of their culture. And obviously, Barbershop's not immune to all these changes that we've talked about, right? Membership's declining in all of our organizations. And even though we've seen TV shows like Glee and Pitch Perfect and The Sing Off, none of those have really driven a whole slew of new members into Barbershop. We're not seeing a meaningful positive impact just because there's a greater interest in, let's say, a cappella singing or singing in general. All right, so let's talk about member groups. Basically, Barbershoppers, and I can't see if people are raising their hand to ask a question. Unfortunately, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see all of you at the same time. So Lisa, feel free to interrupt me at any point if somebody's got a question or something that needs my attention.
Okay.
So essentially, Barbershoppers tend to fit into one of two groups. Those with a preference for affiliation, hanging out with other people, and those with a preference for achievement. Now, I talked before about how our traditional generation and those that are older tend to naturally fall more toward the affiliation side of the scale, if you will. Those that are in younger generations tend to fall more toward the achievement side, and the boomers could go in either direction, depends a lot on sort of how they grew up. These two groups tend to be very different in their needs, and understanding those differences is critical if your chapter wants to be successful, your chorus wants to be successful. I said this before, but I'll say it again. I don't want you to think that achievement-oriented members don't want to have relationships with people. Everybody wants relationships of some form. It's just that the things that cause them to band together with other people are different. The motivations are different between those that are affiliation-oriented and those that are achievement-oriented. And as I mentioned, the groups are not age-specific, but age can often be an indicator of which way they will go. All right, so in general, if we talk about any barbershop group, there's effectively three ways that we spend our time, three types of activities in which we participate. There's fellowship or sisterhood in this case. So being with others, that tends to fulfill the needs of affiliation-oriented people. And that could be doing anything. There's, at the other end of the spectrum, there's competition, a focus on achievement and, more importantly, being measured by others to determine if you are achieving or not. And then performance can be sort of at any end of the spectrum, right? Someone may just be interested in performing at a lower level of effort and quality, and that's great. They tend to be more on the fellowship side of the scale. Someone else might be interested in putting on Broadway quality shows. They're clearly more on the achievement-oriented of the end of the scale. And so this can go either way with respect to who might be motivated by performing. There are other activities, ways in which we spend our time, let's say, civic activities in the community, et cetera. Those tend, though, to fall into one of these three buckets, often more toward the fellowship side. All right, I don't need to go into chapter demographics in depth here. Lisa's already shared some information with me about sort of the makeup of your chapter. So I'm just going to skip through this quickly, but questions for all of you to think about in your own mind. What or how many different generations do you have represented in your chorus today? And what impact does it have if you have multiple generations represented? What portion of your membership do you think is more oriented toward an affiliation interest or an achievement interest? And what impact is there if you've got a mix of both? And then what portion of your chapter is predominantly interested in the sisterhood aspects or the performance aspects or the competition aspects? Okay, we'll continue on. So I'm going to talk about customer groups. And in the context of this section of the class, when I refer to a customer, I'm talking about any person, group, or entity that has or could develop an interest in a chapter. So what am I really saying here? I'm saying anyone. When I talk about a customer, I'm talking about any person who's not dead, basically. Any breathing person is a customer. Now, that's a lot of things to think about, right? So we narrow it down into 6 groups so that we can talk about them and what their needs are in a meaningful way. We've got existing members. That's all of you here on the Zoom call. We've got potential new members, and that could include former members of the chorus. We've got Barbershop fans, which includes families and friends of your members. These are people who know what Barbershop is, have already decided that they like it. We've got the general public. These are people who are not yet fans of Barbershop. They may not even know what Barbershop is yet. There's another group of customers. These are people who can give you a performance opportunity. So that could be an individual that would hire you, an organization. It includes the press, the media, who might create awareness of your existence, which could lead to a performance opportunity. And then finally, there's a 6th group. They're not really a customer per se, but that's your chapter leadership, which in this chapter is a meaningful number of you. The chapter leadership has needs that we also have to think about when we talk about the needs of our customer groups. All right. So a question that you, as a chorus, as a chapter, need to ask yourselves is, which customer groups do you want to serve? And how does that align with your chapter demographics? So we can have a little discussion right now, and it wouldn't be a bad place to take a break if anybody needs to step away from their computer for a moment. Why don't we spend a few minutes just talking about which chapter groups might exist in your course today, and more importantly, which ones do you want to serve? So, Lisa, I'm going to assume you'd like to serve the existing members and their needs. That's usually a good idea. Okay. What about potential or new members? Is there an interest in seeing the chorus get bigger?
Yes, there definitely is for us. We actually have 4 guests going through the process right now with us. We haven't included them this evening because considering it's a coaching session, so it's members only.
Sure.
But definitely, yes, we are interested in new members, growing the chorus, and working consistently on that.
Okay, great. Now, thinking back, if you want to recruit new members, remember what we've covered in the last few minutes around the differences in generations and the impacts that that can have on how they behave, what their interests are, what's going to get them motivated. We'll get into that deeper when we do the Grow Your Chapter class, but just keep that in mind as a group. How interested or not interested are you in serving the needs of barbershop fans?
Yes, I think interested, less so than maybe growing our new membership.
Okay. And then what about the public? And this is an interesting one. There are choruses out there who've said, you know what, we're not really trying to attract a huge new audience to our shows, or we're not interested in pursuing that. We'd rather spend our time singing for people who already know and love barbershop. So our primary interest is in the barbershop fan and far less so in the public. And therefore, we're going to go to places where we know barbershop fans will be. We're going to do things to attract barbershop fans to see us perform in the cases where they perform. But for your chorus, how important is the public?
For us, that's a new potential membership base. So we do love to get out to places who haven't seen us before. We always take performances that are in new and different places.
Right. Now you guys have, or you have shared with me, and sorry, when I say guys, I mean it in the general sense, no intentional sexism here. Sorry about that. But Lisa, you've shared with me that, and I was surprised to learn this, that your chorus does a lot of public performances in front of meaningfully large audiences of non-barbershop fans. And I don't mean they hate barbershop. I mean, they just don't know it. And that's like a regular thing. Every year, you've got a whole bunch of annual stuff that keeps coming up over and over again. So it's going to be important to you as a chapter to understand if you're trying to use those as recruiting opportunities or awareness opportunities to sell tickets, or even just to create community connection, whatever purpose you hope for out of doing those events, it's going to be important to really, when we get into this Grow Your Audience class, to think about what I share around how to attract the public to you, because we're going to talk in depth about the public as a customer and what their needs are relative to these other groups. Performance opportunities. Now you have a ton of them already. Are you still trying to get more?
We're always open to more. We don't necessarily go searching for them.
Okay. So maybe as a customer group, that might be one that you're less concerned with satisfying their needs, let's say in the near term, but one to keep considering. And then really, how important is it to keep the chapter leadership happy and satisfy their needs? And I know the answer is it's not important, because that's what everybody says. But given that most of your chorus, or a good portion of your chorus, is the chapter leadership, just for your own sanity, that's a set of needs that you probably want to be thinking about.
Right.
All right. So you got all these customer groups that you want to serve at varying levels. How does that align with, or possibly not align with, your existing chapter demographics? And I'm going to focus in particular on the chapter group of potential new members.
Okay.
So if you think about the folks that you would like to attract as new members, and the members that you already have today, and sort of the values and the generational and societal things that we've talked about already, what thoughts does that bring to mind for you? And I don't just mean you, Lisa, specifically. Anybody's welcome to provide feedback here, of course. What thoughts does that raise for you, or concerns does that raise for you about your ability to recruit new members?
One thing that I've noticed over the years is that we spent quite a while trying to recruit younger people, and like significantly younger people. So our children, our children's friends. At one point we had 6 mother-daughter combinations in the chorus.
Wow.
So we had quite a bit of youth. They don't stick around. And when you talk to them, sometimes they move away. Lots of stuff like that happens, but they're not as connected as people closer to, our average age is necessarily.
Okay.
So we've been focusing more lately on like kind of trying to stay within a generation younger than we are, or a decade younger.
Sure.
Closer to our age we seem to relate better, and they relate better to us.
Great. Okay. So that's something that I'll talk about in the membership class as well, is that oftentimes I find, and I think I may have mentioned this to you personally as well, I find chapters that are, let's say that their average member age is 60 plus, and they're out trying to recruit high school kids or college age people. And that often tends to be a gap that's just too far to bridge. And so my recommendation is always, and I'll share this again in the other class, my recommendation is recruit people that are 10 years younger than yourself. When a member goes out and says, okay, I'm going to try to bring some more members in, focus on the folks that are just 10 years younger than yourself. Because within a 10-year span, you've shared many of the same experiences. Maybe you don't have kids at home anymore and their kids are in their late teen years and soon to leave, right? Or maybe you have teenagers and they have slightly younger kids. But the point is you are at a place in your life that's not that far removed from the place that they are in their lives, versus a 70-year-old trying to talk to a 20-year-old, right? It's just, I'm not saying it can't happen or that it won't work, but it's difficult for the 20-year-old to perceive that the 70-year-old has the same sorts of experiences, can understand where that 20-year-old is coming from, et cetera. And so it's about creating that connection on a human level that is frankly easier when you've had some basis for shared experiences, shared errors in which you've grown up, those sorts of things. All right, let's keep going. So some chapters try to be all things to all people. And given that I've shown you that our customer groups, including members, have needs that may not align, how likely are those chapters to be successful? And this is kind of a rhetorical question. The answer is they're not often very likely to be successful. I know plenty of chapters who try to compete and try to do 2 shows a year and try to do a whole bunch of civic projects and also try to recruit young people and try to have great fellowship or sisterhood, et cetera. And so they tend to be kind of mediocre at everything and not very good at any of those individual things. And how satisfied are their members likely to be? How successful are they likely to be at recruiting new members when they have this smattering of things that they're trying to accomplish? So you might find for your chapter that you can be more successful if you focus on the needs of a limited number of those customer groups that I talked about. Now, that could result in a reduction of the sisterhood activities, the performance activities, or the competitive activities, which might alienate some of your members. Now, how many chapters are willing to do that? So, for example, let's say that your chapter decided, okay, we're going to take a more specific focus around X, Y, and Z. We're going to abandon A, B, and C, but that means you're going to lose 1/3 of your members tomorrow. Are you willing to lose 1/3 of your members tomorrow with the idea that going forward, you will eventually recruit replacements for them by having a more specific focus? Many chapters, especially if it's a 12-person chapter and they have one tenor, it's really hard for them to say, we're going to make a change that will cause our tenor to go away, because how can we then sing, right? Sometimes the pain of making those changes is just so severe that it's hard to get started. The problem is, if you don't consider making those changes, you may not be any better off than you are today. And in your case, your chapter is actually quite successful. I mean, I look around the society, men's and women's, and I see a lot of chapters that are struggling far more than you are. So I think you're starting from a good place, but these are still thoughts and exercises that you may want to go through. All right, so imagine, this is my dream for the future, but imagine a world in which there's lots of chapters, most of which have a single purpose, It's a competition chapter, or it's a civic works chapter, or it's a performing at a Broadway level chapter, or it's a we only sing at senior citizen facilities chapter, or whatever it is. But lots of chapters, predominantly with single intents, that there's a lot of members happy in those chapters because they've found the chapter that fits best for them. Yes, there's a few people that are dual members, but most importantly, there's no stigma attached with being a dual member. If I say, you know, I really like doing civic works and I also like singing in a clown suit, then I can be in both the chapter that sings in clown suits and the chapter that does civic works. And neither of those, the members of those two groups shouldn't feel bad that I'm in both, right? And that each of these chapters, or at least most of them, have some sort of a unique persona so that potential members can be attracted to the chapter that fits them best. Now, there has to be a willingness in this world that I imagine. There has to be a willingness to say, you know what, we've loved having you as a guest, but we think you're going to be happier down the street because that chapter down there is a better fit for what you're looking for. And how many of our choruses today are willing to turn away a potential member and send them to the chorus down the street, right? It just doesn't happen very often. If anything, there's a rivalry over potential members between choruses that leads us to hang on to them as tightly as we can, every new guest that comes in the door, right? Even if that's not the right choice for the guest, because we're so desperate to try to retain and grow. All right, so let's think about our average chapter in SAI and in BHS. Our average age in both organizations is greater than 60, which means that simply by age relationship, we have a lot of chapters that are already made up of people who are naturally affiliation oriented. They want to band together around a common history, a common interest, if you will. But to survive, they've been encouraged to recruit younger members. This was particularly true in the men's organization. For about 20 years, the messaging was, go get the high school age boys to sing on your show and they'll become members. Well, the problem with that, of course, is even if they join, their interests tend to be different. So maybe they want to be far more competitive than the older members of the chapter are interested in. Maybe they want to sing different repertoire than the older members of the chapter are interested in. And so you get these conflicts of interests that weren't really considered before trying to add these people to the chapter. And the end result is nobody's really happy. Everybody's sort of 75% happy and 25% unhappy, right? The end result there, of course, is eventually people fade away. They don't necessarily make a conscious decision of this sucks, I'm leaving. They're just like, well, you know, it's Tuesday night, I've got rehearsal, or I could stay home and play Xbox. Which one am I going to do? Right? And eventually the Xbox wins and they just stop showing up for rehearsals. All right. So Barbershop needs both. Sometimes people will wonder if I'm suggesting that what we should be building is a ton of achievement-oriented chapters. And that's not true at all. Keep in mind, and I can't draw on the screen here very easily, but there's a thing in sports called the pyramid of participation. So at the bottom of a pyramid, if you just think about a triangle, at the bottom of the pyramid, the widest base of the triangle, and let's talk about basketball as an example, right? Because we've got some Canadian basketball teams, or at least one, right? There's still one in Toronto. At the bottom of the pyramid, when we talk about basketball, are millions of social basketball players. And then at the next level up in the pyramid, it's a smaller chunk, right? It's getting narrower as we go to the top. The next level up, we've got college level basketball players. And then we've got what we call the developmental league. And when you get to near the top, you've got the NBA, right? Those are the best players in the world. But there's only, let's say, 450 of them. Well, why are there 450? Because the farther up the pyramid of participation you go, the harder it is to be there and to stay there, right? There's a reason that a small number of people ever become Olympic athletes, because the level of dedication, effort, money, time, et cetera, that goes into it is very, very high. The problem is, and this is true of Barbershop as well, right? There's a reason that we have top 10 quartetters and choruses and a lot of people that are not in the top 10. The problem is, if your base at the bottom of the pyramid is small, the number of people who get to the top is also small. When there's no social luging, and there's only 2 places in North America where you can go train to luge, You've only got 10 or 15 people at the bottom of the pyramid who are losing, which means when you get to the Olympic level, there's only one or two per country, right? Because your number of social participants at the bottom is low. So if we want Barbershop to not just survive, but thrive, we need to have a lot more social barbershop singers. We need to make it stupidly easy for them to participate. The time commitments need to fit with their schedules. The additional work that they have to do as chapter leaders or musical leaders has to actually fit within their schedules. There are many of us for whom barbershop is a lifestyle, but the people that we want to attract into barbershop, if you want to have a lot of social singers at that base, aren't going to be interested in barbershop as a lifestyle. They don't have the time for that. They've already got a very full life. Now they're trying to squeeze barbershop into it somewhere. So we have to make that possible for them. We have to make that achievable for them, right? We can't expect them to just become lifetime converts like many of us might be, because they're not going to, right? Think about social barbershop the way we would think about being on a softball team, a co-rec softball team, right? Mixed gender softball team or a mixed gender soccer team. There's millions of people across North America playing social softball, social soccer. They play because it's fun. They play because they like to have beers with their friends and hang out a little bit afterwards, but they're putting almost zero time into improving their skills between games. Yeah, they might have the occasional practice if they're a little bit more serious, but most of them are not putting any meaningful effort into improving their skills between games. And yet we bring in a new person to barbershop and we tell them, oh yeah, there's going to be rehearsals and then you've got to rehearse at home in between. You got to tape yourself. You got to do this and that and the other thing. Now that's all well and good for the person who wants to be competitive or wants to achieve a certain level of barbershop quality and put the effort in, the time in, et cetera. Maybe they're not going to go to the Olympics or barbershop, but they're going to at least get to, say, the collegiate equivalent, right, on that participation pyramid. The problem is we've really alienated or eliminated the ability for there to be that massive base at the bottom of the pyramid of social barbershop singers. We've made it too hard to participate at that level, and we need to bring that back, because you can't have hundreds of top 10 singers if you don't have frankly tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of social singers at the bottom, right? The bigger your base is, the bigger it's going to be at the top. All right, let me continue on here. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about attracting members. Before I do that, I've noticed that my camera has shut itself down, probably timed out. So let me see if I can get that back up and running. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, you can see me again. Sorry, I was trying to show you the pyramid and you couldn't see my hands, and I realized that. So, all right, let's talk about attracting members in this new world of changing demographics, changing generational and societal impact. So when we talk about customers, again, we're talking about those 5 or 6 customer groups if we include our chapter leadership. And when you want to attract any of those customer groups and the customers that are part of them, you have to be delivering the product they want, which may not be the product that you want. And that's an important distinction, right? So we're going to talk here for a moment about potential members and the properties of an attractive chapter. So if they are naturally an affiliation-oriented person, which again, I made the point that often people over a certain age tend to be more oriented this way, but there's lots of younger people that are too, right? Arguably, anyone who plays on a social softball team or a social soccer team is more affiliation than they are achievement oriented. They're not putting a lot of time or effort into improving their skills, but they still want to hang out with other people who play soccer, right? The difference is they're not getting together because they're all Swedish or German. They're getting together because they have this common sports interest, right? What we need to do is convince those people that barbershop is more fun than softball or soccer or curling, and get them into our chapters instead, right? So for these folks, rehearsals are all about fellowship or sisterhood. They should be loosely structured with lots of breaks, lots of chatter, lots of socializing, the kind of stuff that drives the achievement-oriented people nuts, right? Lots of variety, chorus time, quartet activities, recognition, etc. A lot of fun singing. Remember, these are social singers predominantly, so the singing has to be fun, with far less or almost no attention to the quality of the singing. Music's generally learned at rehearsal, not at home, because they're not going to have time or desire to put a lot of effort in at home. And something that this might be less true in Canada or in Sweet Adelines, but certainly in the men's organization, we've really lost something that existed up until probably 1990, which was inter-chapter visits, just showing up unannounced at another chapter's rehearsal night. Now, part of the reason that it happens less often is we all have a lot less free time, right? If you're already rehearsing with your own chapter on Tuesday night, are you also going to keep Wednesday night free to go visit the chapter down the road? Maybe not. It's become harder to make that happen. But that's part of the fun. I'll put it in air quotes. And I've lost my camera again. I wonder what's going on there. But that's part of the fun that these sorts of members or potential members are looking for, that kind of interaction, right? A chapter that's predominantly interested in attracting affiliation members is going to do performances for fun and for human connection, not necessarily for profit or high quality, right? So they're going to do performances with low pressure for audiences without high expectations. They're going to look for frequent opportunities to sing out in the park, holiday carol, sing Valentine's, etc. And again, most of the performances are going to be free because they're not trying to create a level of quality in their singing that would justify a high ticket price. A great example of this, and one that I love, is that I tell every chapter that is not a strong, high quality singing chapter. Let's say they're singing C level or below. And if they don't have an interest in trying to move into the B's or move into the A's, they're comfortable staying in the C's. What I tell them is, you need to be singing at every state fair, every province fair, or whatever it would be called in Canada. Sorry, but every county fair that you can go to, you need to go sing. And why is that? Well, first of all, the audience expectations for high quality tend to be pretty low. You're in an environment where there's noise everywhere. There's dogs barking, there's cows making noise, people are wandering by, spilling ice cream, etc. It's just, you're on a stage in front of a very loud, noisy environment, which means the people who are hearing you aren't really hearing your quality anyway. What they're paying attention to is what's happening on your faces, what's happening with your bodies. You can get up there and sing like crap, but as long as you look like you're having fun, you may attract some people into your chapter because it looks like fun, right? So it's very much about presenting the fun aspect of the singing. And a chapter like this, or let's say a chapter trying to attract affiliation members, tends to have little or no interest in competition, which is not to say they shouldn't go to competitions, because what do these folks want? They want to connect. They want to connect with other people. So what's the best job that you can ever have as a Sweet Adeline at a contest? What's the number one best job, especially if you're affiliation oriented? I'm going to tell you, the number one best job you can have is driving, for a contest, the number one best job you can have is you're the person that walks every competitor to the stage from the green room. It means you get to high five and shake hands with every one of those people who possibly sings better than you do, who's more interested in contests and in competing anyway, but you get to be a piece of that. You get to be around those people without having to necessarily change your personality to put out the effort to be one of those competitors. You get to hang out with the quote unquote best in barbershop and be a part of the thing, right? What's the best job if you're hosting a show? Well, it's very similar. The number one job you can have as a show host is the person who drives around the headlining quartet all weekend and gets to show them your town and treat them and be around these big names in barbershop. Because what does an affiliation person want? They want to hang out. They want sisterhood, right? They want to be around other people and connect with other people. So give that person the driver job, because they're going to love it, right? They're getting to perform a service to those folks. All right, let's continue on. Now, when we talk about potential members that are more achievement oriented, they're going to be motivated by very different things. They're going to be looking for different things from your chorus, from your chapter. For them, fellowship, if you want to be successful with them, fellowship should be a small part of rehearsals. Rehearsals are about getting work done. Rehearsals are about being focused. So there's not going to be a lot of breaks. You're going to have strong riser discipline and you're going to demand it, right? Socializing tends to happen before and after the rehearsal, not during the work time, right? During work time, we're focused. And there's going to be a high attention to singing quality. So music is learned at home, it's practiced at home. These are the folks who are trying to work their way up that participation pyramid. They're not satisfied to just play social soccer. They keep trying to get into the next league up, whatever it might be, or they're trying to encourage their teammates to practice more, to try harder, etc. All right. For these folks, performance is about practice and income. You're not going to do a lot of public performances, and rarely are you going to do them for free, because your intent is to either prepare yourselves for a contest, so you're going to perform at a high quality level because you're getting ready for contest, or your intent is to perform at a high quality level to make money for the chapter so that you can offset some of the other costs, right? Because you're doing fewer public performances, you have fewer opportunities to raise funds. So you're going to charge a higher ticket price for these, but that also means you have to put on a better show, right? And rarely are you going to perform with other groups, except if you're trying to build a relationship with them. So you're not necessarily going to invite the high school choral group onto your show, but I'll come to why you would in a minute. But you're not necessarily going to invite them. You're not going to invite the string quartet onto your show because you're performing as the headliners, right? If you are participating with another group, you're actually offering your services as the headliner to perform on their show, which we get into more in one of the other classes that we'll cover. It's actually a great, for a chorus like yourselves, and I think, Lisa, I might have spoken to you about this already. I really think you should be hosting less, not that you host a lot yourselves, but already, but I think you should consider hosting less and being the headliners more often on other choruses shows. You do no prep work, you show up, you perform, you get paid, and you leave with a check in your hands. It's the easiest gig there is in the world. And you've just reduced the effort they have to put into their show by 50% because they only have to learn half as much music, but they get all the benefit of attracting more ticket buying customers to the show. Now, obviously, you're going to have to get, you take some of their revenue, but it helps them over time to build up their audience as well. And for folks that are achievement oriented, competition, and I mean this in the broader context of, I should probably change this slide to say, instead of say competition is the goal, I should probably say something like quality is the goal. Because maybe this is a chorus that wants to do Broadway quality shows, even if they don't actually compete. But I'll stick with competition for all of you because you tend to be a competition or have historically been a competition focused chorus, right? So that means you want to be measured. You want to know how you're doing. And I know we talk about in Barbershop, look, you can't control the scores. You can't control the judges. That's all true, right? You're going to get what you get. It's less important whether your score is a 40 or an 80. What's important is, was your score a 40 last year and now it's a 50 this year? Are you getting better? Are you succeeding at improving? Because that's what achievement-oriented people care about. They care about continuing to push forward, continuing to move the bar forward, right? So if you're plateauing, you have to think about, all right, what are we doing to solve that plateau? How are we going to get past this? What's going to make it possible? So you're using contest scores, as I say here, as a measurement of your quality and your progress, less so about, oh, we're going to feel bad because we just scored, I'm making up stuff here. We just scored an 80. That number doesn't seem high enough to me. Well, again, you can't focus on whether it was an 80 or an 85. You have to focus on, did you sing better than last time? Are you getting better? And perhaps most importantly here, competition-focused people tend to host irregularly or never, because again, you want to be on the stage competing. You don't want to be worrying about the effort required to host a contest, for example, a regional and whatnot. Potential members that are achievement oriented. Okay, so if you're trying to attract them, you're going to focus on their singing ability, their ability to learn, their desire to sing well. You're going to use messaging, and we'll get into this in the marketing class. You're going to use messaging that's going to attract people who might already have a musical background, right? You're going to use extensive auditions to, I hate to say it like this, but to weed out the people who aren't going to be successful in your chapter. But then you're going to say to them, well, there's this other chapter down the street where we think you'd have a great time, and you're going to send them down there. You're going to willingly send them away, knowing that ultimately they're not going to be the right fit for your chorus anyhow. Dues are high to cover coaching and other chapter costs. Now, this is more something I talk to the men's organization chapters about than the women's orgs. A long time ago, SAI and HI realized that you need to charge an appropriate price for the service that you're offering your members. And Lisa, what are your dues, your member dues right now?
Who can help me out with that one?
Is it like $35 a month, and that includes your regional and international, or
annual? It's
320.
Thank you.
Okay.
Annual dues, and that's all three. That's international, regional, and
yeah. So what's that? Just shy a little more than $25 a month, if my calculations are right,
no.
Or am I wrong? I don't know. It doesn't matter. 320 is a very high number. Let me share with you, and I think I have this in one of my later classes, that in the men's organization, the average dues are about $60 a year.
Wow.
There are chapters in the men's organization that are offering their members a 2.5-hour rehearsal every week. So 2.5 hours, excuse me, of participatory entertainment every week for an average price of less than 50 cents an hour. Right? It's ridiculously cheap. You can't go to the movies for that. You can't go bowling for that. You're not going to curl for that kind of money, right? Barbershop has not kept pace over the last 50 plus years with the price increases that we've seen in other forms of entertainment, in part because for so many years, Barbershop has been run by and ruled by those older generations who tend to be very frugal and penny pinchers, who are resistant to price increases. And don't get me wrong, I recognize that there are many people, older generations, who are on a fixed income for whom higher prices may be a difficulty. And so, of course, every chapter should have, and at the national level, regional level, we need to have solutions for people who, based on their ability to pay. But when you start to talk to a younger person, younger generations, they're dropping $5 a day on a Starbucks coffee without thinking about it. The idea that they would have to pay, let's say, $20 a month for 4 rehearsals of 2.5 or 3 hours per rehearsal is nothing to them, right? It's a drop in the bucket. They won't think twice about saying yes, as long as they're motivated to do it, as long as they're seeing and deriving the value that they're looking for out of that experience. They will, as I mentioned earlier, they care more about time than money. They'll spend their money on the things that they care about. And so when you're trying to attract these achievement-oriented members, one thing that you might want to think about is, well, perhaps dues should be higher. Again, less of an issue in Sweet Adelines than it is in the men's organization, perhaps, but the macro point being here that dues need to be high to cover basic operational costs of the chapter. I meet a lot of chapters who tell me, well, we do a summer show and we make just enough money to survive until December. Then we do a winter show and we make just enough money to survive until June. And then we do a summer show. And they're on what I refer to as the financial hamster wheel. That if they weren't doing shows every 6 months, the chapter would come to an end because they're charging their members almost nothing to participate. The downside to that, of course, is they can never really get better because they're spending all of their time preparing for the next show. They're not spending any of their time getting better. And when I say getting better, I don't necessarily mean getting better at singing. I mean, maybe getting better at sisterhood or fellowship and satisfying the needs and wants of their affiliation members. Maybe getting better at their civic engagement or civic participation. Maybe getting better at the shows that they put on. Whatever it is that they want to get better at, they're never going to get better because 100% of their effort is going into just staying alive financially. And if they charge more for dues, assuming their members can pay that, then there's less pressure to have to keep doing shows that generate revenue to keep the chapter alive. You guys are quite fortunate. It sounds like you make a ton of money from some of your recurring public performances. So you're in a very enviable position.
Alberta, and I've got Alberta Chorus as well. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Chris. We get a lot of our funding through arts grants and also through, we do casinos every 2 to 3 years. So the bulk of our budget is actually money that doesn't come from our members.
Sure. Just another reason for me and my wife to permanently move to Canada. You guys do so many things better than we do here in the States. I was, as an aside, I'll mention this. When I first started curling, I got pretty serious. This was back in 2008. And by 2010, I was going up in the summer months to curl in BC, to train in BC, because the curling club here in Seattle was closed during the summer months. And I was shocked to learn how much government and tax support there is for the arts, for sports, for everything. Because in America, it's all about rugged individualism, which means we put no tax dollars into any of that stuff. We don't have these sorts of community centers that have hockey plus curling plus swimming pools plus everything. Those just don't exist in most parts of America because we're unwilling to, well, we're stupid and we're unwilling to tax ourselves to have better lives like that. So you people have done it right. I really should move there. Okay, let me continue on. So achievement-oriented folks, if you're trying to attract them, they're less motivated by or interested in having their families become a part of the whole barbershop experience. Sure, the families will show up for the show occasionally, but their family members, the husband, the wife, whoever it might be, are frankly busy with their own lives. They're not going to just show up at a rehearsal every week and hang out. Right. The idea, I mean, you think back to barbershop in the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, you had these, what were they called? The auxiliaries, right? In the men's org, you'd have a men's barbershop chorus and all the wives would come and they'd bring cookies and they do all this. Like now, forget about it. The wife's not coming to the rehearsal. She's got her own stuff to do on Tuesday night, right? And I can't imagine most of your men or your partners, I should say, are going to show up on a Tuesday night for your rehearsals either, just to sit around and watch you sing. So especially for achievement-oriented people, trying to find ways to involve their families is less of a motivator, right? Because they're going to care less. And then a director for these sorts of folks really needs to be an achievement-driven person with strong musical skills. And I wonder, did I miss a slide? Yeah, I think I might have. I touched on this, but I probably skipped the director one here. If you're trying to build a great affiliation-oriented chapter, let's call it a social singing chapter, the director does not need to be, and probably shouldn't be, a really strong, deeply educated musician or person with a musical background, because they're likely to just get frustrated by the low level of commitment toward excellence that you're going to get out of these members. Right? What you really want instead is a very social person who can get up and wave their hands while the chorus learns, from their sheet music right there on the risers, because that's the kind of experience that they want. And that sort of a person is far less likely to get frustrated with their needs. Okay, you can't be half pregnant. We probably all know that to be true. And here's what I mean. It's hard to be really good as both an affiliation-oriented chorus or chapter and an achievement-oriented chorus or chapter. So the question you have to ask yourselves is, are you already what you want your chapter to be? And are you playing to your strengths? And if not, do you need to make some change? Well, changes are hard. So be prepared. And this really goes to the chapter leadership in particular. When you decide to make changes to the focus of the chapter, even if it's just eliminating some things on the fringes that some people like, but most people don't care for as much, you're going to end up with some unhappy existing members who start to quit. So now your membership level starts to drop. Your chapter leadership gets scared. Oh no, we've lost 5 people in the last 2 months. So maybe we're pushing too hard on these changes. Let's not really commit to that transition. And then you're trying to attract new people to the image of the new chorus that you're trying to create, except you're only sort of half-heartedly going about those changes. And so they don't necessarily fully commit to or ultimately join the chapter. So some ideas to satisfy both groups. Well, since lots of affiliation-oriented members, at least in the older age ranges, tend to be retired, if you are a chapter, and this I'm going to speak in generalities because this might not be true for your particular chorus. But let's say that you're a chapter that has some older members, but you've tried to attract a lot of newer, younger members. Those newer, younger members really want to compete a lot. They want to sing harder, sing better, etc. What can you do for your affiliation-oriented older members? Well, one option is give them a daytime chorus that essentially runs itself, but under your chapter umbrella, that gives them the freedom to have a more relaxed rehearsal, to have more relaxed performances with less obligation to practice at home and whatnot. If you instead are a chapter that's predominantly affiliation-oriented people that just want to social sing, but you've got a few people who've come in, hot singers who just want to sing really well, encourage them to form their own subgroup to sing what they want, to sing the different repertoire, to sing at a higher level of quality, to rehearse together as a group 4 times a week in non-COVID times, because that's what they want to do. Even nobody else wants to rehearse 4 times a week, right? Give them ways to satisfy that desire. But if you can't make it work, let them go, but do it in an encouraging way. Just like I was describing before, if somebody shows up on your guest night who's clearly not going to be a fit for what your chapter is or wants to be, encourage them to go down the street. Encourage them to go somewhere else. Don't let them leave Barbershop just because what you're offering to them is not what they want, right? And don't try to pigeonhole them into, square peg, round hole. Don't try to force them to fit into your model if it's not the right fit for them. Send them to some place that is going to satisfy their needs in a way that keeps them interested in Barbershop. And that could include the creation of another chapter, helping to sponsor the creation of a new chapter that has a different purpose or persona than yours. Don't oversell when you're recruiting, right? It's a lot easier, they say, to keep the people you have than to get new people in the door. So retention in Barbershop is critical, and we don't do a very good job of this, right? Retention is more important than recruiting new members. As I've mentioned previously, on average, both organizations keep our new members less than 2 years from the time of their first appearance at a guest night or in some other way are recruited. That's really bad. That's in my industry, we call that a churn rate. That's a terrible, terrible churn rate that we can't keep them more than 2 years. So we need to figure out why they're leaving, and we need to solve that if we want them to stay in Barbershop, right? Now, maybe they're leaving because it was a square peg, round hole, and it took us a while to figure that out. Maybe they weren't the right fit for our chapter, or our chapter is not the right fit for them. But don't wait until they quit Barbershop entirely to figure that out. Figure it out earlier and get them involved in the right Barbershop solution for them, whatever that solution might be. This last bullet point is probably the most critical. You have to be willing to be honest with yourselves about what you are and what you are not or don't want to be, so that you can be honest with the membership and the potential members about what you are and what you are not. Don't sell what you don't actually have, right? Don't claim to be, we're going to be a top 10 chorus in 2 years if you're not actually on a path to achieve that. Don't recruit members that are going to be the wrong fit, right? There's no reason, if you're not on a strongly affiliation-oriented chapter, there's no reason to go after affiliation-oriented people, because ultimately they're not going to be happy with what you're offering and they'll peel away over time. And if you're making the transition between, let's say, an affiliation-oriented, perhaps older chorus to trying to be a younger, more achievement-oriented chorus, in some cases we see this happen, be honest about where you are in the journey. Right? Or let's take an even simpler example, and I'm making this up. It's not specific to all of you. Let's say that you're a 50 or 60-year-old C- singing chorus, but you've got a new director, and you're on the journey to try to sing B+. Well, be honest about that. Don't tell people, oh, we're singing B+ if you're not actually, if you're singing C- today, right? Be honest about where you are and what you're trying to do to get to B+. Let's make every chapter great. And I touched on this earlier. I think that historically in Barbershop, certainly this is true in men's, maybe less so in women's, but in men's Barbershop, we went through a period of time where the society was telling us back in the 80s and the 90s you must sing better, that poor singing chapters are bad representatives of Barbershop. And so there was a strong emphasis for about 20 years on improving singing quality, on going to division and district contests every 3 years, on if you're not singing above a certain level, you probably shouldn't be, in the society, things like that. I think that was, and I think now the society board would agree as well, that was a fundamental mistake that Men's Barbershop was making, that they failed to recognize that pyramid of participation that I described before, that if you don't have millions of social barbershop singers, there's a problem. And that by telling everybody they had to work harder and sing better and do more in their spare time at home, while at the same time we were seeing these societal changes that meant they had less free time at home anyway, there's a big conflict there, right? I think you can all recognize that. So we were making demands of chapter members that were just completely misaligned with their ability to satisfy those demands, or even in many cases with their personal interest. That was a huge mistake. And we drove a lot of people away from Barbershop. We failed to recruit in a meaningful way over that 20-year period. And that's why we've seen membership, continuing to decline in the 20 plus years since. But along with that, we have to now recognize that being a great chapter doesn't necessarily mean singing well. Being a great chapter doesn't necessarily mean getting high contest scores. It doesn't necessarily even mean going to contest ever, in my mind, right? I know of, there are chapters in the men's org that have 120 members, and they don't sing very well, but they have a lot of fun. And they have no trouble whatsoever recruiting people to join their chapter. And they have no interest in contest or singing above a C-ish social level. But they have a ton of fun every week, and they have an easy time attracting more people to their chapter. Why? Because they've decided what it is that they want to be, and they're trying to be the very best that they can at being that thing, at that persona, at that interest, whatever it might be. They've chosen an identity, and they've put all of their effort into being the best that they can at that entity, that identity. So I've spoken to this before, but if you can't meet the needs of a member, are you actively encouraging them to join another chapter, to form a new chapter, etc.? And if you're not, why are you not? Is it because they're your only tenor and you're afraid of losing them, right? It's like, how are we going to have a rehearsal without a tenor? Well, you're going to rehearse without a tenor until you can recruit a new one to the chapter that you want to be, right? Go find the right person. Once you have a great product, whatever that product is, recruiting tends to be a lot easier. But first you have to decide what is your product and what can you do to make it great. A lot of chapters fail to make a great product. And so the money and the effort, the time that they put into trying to recruit new members ends up being wasted because they don't have something to offer that a potential member wants, or they're trying to recruit the wrong people, or right? There's a whole list of or. So doing something wrong, that means that they're really just wasting their time and their money. All right. So what have we learned? Well, first of all, since I'm just presenting this to a single chapter, you didn't get this opportunity, but when I presented in front of many people from different chapters, they're all raising their hands and answer the questions, and they discover, wow, all chapters have kind of the same problems. There's a truism there, right? So I like to say this: share your good ideas with other chapters and steal their good ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. Plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery. So if somebody else is doing something that you like, if someone else has a solution to a problem that you think is great, steal it, use it. That's a good thing. We've learned that societal and generational changes are having a huge impact on Barbershop and society more generally, nonprofits more generally. That understanding the needs of your members and your potential members is critical to your success, and that tailoring your product, and again, when I say product, that's kind of in air quotes, right? The things that you offer to potential members, to your existing members, can improve your member satisfaction and help you attract new members. All right, let's fire away with questions. I'll stop sharing my screen and hopefully I can get my camera working again as well. We'll see. Okay, there's the camera. I'm on a Mac and I've got a Windows camera that has never worked well with this Mac, so it's time to get a new one, I think. Okay. Got a slideshow. All right, who's got questions while I get this thing working?
Yes, go ahead, Jen.
Just more of a comment maybe and get Chris's take on it. I've been introduced to the InstaChoir thing that they have online where apparently tons of people that want to sing and don't have anywhere to sing are flocking to this. So maybe with COVID, it's going to be creating a whole different type of a new member because everyone has been so isolated for so long that they're going to want that affiliation once again and realize the connection and maybe that will make things grow. I just kind of wanted to get your take on that.
Sure. So I think that for the most part, I think the InstaChoirs, the Eric Whitaker things, where thousands of people submit their audio to contribute to sort of a mass choral sing. I think those tend to attract two groups of people. People who already sing in some capacity, like all of us, who might say, okay, that looks like fun. I'm going to go ahead. I already know the basics of singing. I'm going to learn this part. I'm going to record myself and sing it. But there's a second group of people who are attracted to those. And those are people who think they can sing. And I'm not saying they can't sing. But the point is they've never necessarily had the opportunity to meaningfully participate in organized singing before. Maybe there was no chorus when they grew up in school. Maybe no high school chorus, things like that. Maybe they didn't attend church and have an opportunity to sing in a choral group in church. And so for them, this is their sort of first opportunity to explore an experience of choral singing. And so far, the only experience they've had is one in which they sat alone in their room as quietly as possible while recording themselves singing while listening to a learning track in their ears. And then they saw the end result of they were one face in 1,000. So they haven't really had, speaking to your point, Jennifer, they haven't really had any social experience of singing at all. They haven't actually performed in front of a live audience. They haven't performed in a contest setting. They haven't even had a rehearsal around other human beings, right? So I think there is an opportunity to attract those people who might be participating, who are in that group and might be participating in these sort of InstaChoirs to make them aware that when COVID is over, they can actually come sing with real human beings in the same room. That'll be cool. Let's try that, right? So we want to be promoting that. Whether they turn to Barbershop or anything else, it really doesn't matter. We need to, as barbershoppers, we need to remember that we're a part of the larger choral music environment in North America, and that we need to be promoting choral singing in all of its forms, not just in barbershop, because there's some people out there who might decide they like, Baroque music better, or they might like, I don't know, I'll just make something up, Latin jazz better. It doesn't really matter. The point is, we want more singers, right? Again, pyramid of participation. If there's millions of people down here singing socially, some portion of them are going to be singing barbershop, no matter what, right? We just need more people singing, period. So anything and everything that we can do to encourage folks who participate in those ways during COVID to actually then bring that interest to a live setting, we should be trying to do. Other questions?
Good questions.
There's got to be more.
Looking through here. Ladies, go ahead and just ask the question if you have it. I've got Chris is spotlighted, so I'm not seeing everybody else.
Anybody jump in if you got a question. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and start talking.
Please do.
Okay, it's Jennifer again.
Sure. Nothing
In
wrong with that.
in regards to like music in schools,
Mhm.
where I have come from in a rural community in Alberta and just moving to Edmonton, our rural community did not even have music in our schools either. And that has been a
Sure.
frustration, I think, with a lot of people in Alberta and Alberta education for years,
Mhm.
that music is not in school because there's so much brain research that it's good for your brain, it's good for kids developmentally if
Yep.
they have it younger, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that is frustrating. So maybe that is another opportunity for a bit of recruitment, as you say, you know, maybe not having your 80-year-olds going to the high school to sing, but
Sure.
just
Well,
introducing that young group of people to a music appreciation that some of them might love it.
right. Absolutely. So let me touch on a couple of things. And some of these I would, excuse me, probably dive into in a little more detail when we get into the class on recruiting. But camera went dead again. Sorry. Um, Oftentimes in the men's org, I touched on this earlier. A chapter of older members will say, "Well, we're going to invite the high school chorus onto our show because we want to recruit those 17-year-old boys to join our chorus." That's the wrong reason to do it. Yes, you should put them on your show, but it's not because you want the 17-year-olds. It's because you want their 40-year-old parents who are closer to your own age. And I don't mean you ladies specifically, I mean the chapter, right? The goal of putting teenagers on your show is not about recruiting teenagers into your chapter. It's about recruiting their parents into your chapter. It's about demonstrating to the parent who hasn't considered singing, oh, wow, I see adults of my age up there on stage singing with, and again, when you invite the young people on your show, don't just have them perform by themselves. Learn a song together or two songs together, because then the parents see adults singing with their children and they think to themselves, huh, well, I'd love to sing with Johnny or Jenny. That would be really cool. I never even considered that before. And then during the show, after the show, you can be talking to the parents about how they could get involved. Okay, now you've just gained two members, the teenager and the parent, versus no members because the teenager is unlikely to join on their own, right? Excuse me. Similarly, with respect to what you were just describing, school systems that don't necessarily have a music program. One of the things that we know about music in general, that music educators know, is that even a little exposure early can plant a seed that can happen again or bloom later in life. And in some ways, my own life is an example of this. I was first exposed to barbershop while in high school, and I didn't sing barbershop again for over 20 years, but it stuck with me. I always wanted to do it again. I didn't sing again for 20 years, but when I came back to singing, I was back into barbershop within a year of when I decided to start singing again in my life. And then I've been in barbershop for 15 plus years since. So whether it's barbershop or just singing in general, our chapters can, if they choose to, have a role in simply introducing choral singing to these communities where perhaps it's not part of the educational program, right? Doing outreach to, if there's no music program at all, it's tough to find a music educator to work with. But if there's any sort of a music program, maybe it's instrumental only, maybe they just have a symphony or a jazz band or whatever, but they don't have any singers or a choral program at all. Okay, fine. Work with the jazz teacher to say, hey, we'd love to get your jazz group on our show where we sing a song with you, right? Or if it's and this is a thing that I mentioned to a lot of chapters, less about recruiting youth, but let's say that you're a chapter in a smaller town. This might not be so true for you guys, but a chapter in a smaller town where there's a 20-person symphony orchestra. Well, you want to invite them on your show for the holidays because you're then going to get to have their audience discover you and discover barbershop as well. But it's not enough to just invite them on the show to perform. What you actually want to do is go to them and say, hey, we're singers. Yeah, we mostly sing barbershop, but guess what? We want to learn 2 songs with you from your, let's say, holiday repertoire. Because you're talking about a 20-person symphony who has never gotten to perform great symphonic music because they don't have a singing group. So they only perform instrumental. You go to them and you say, you know what? I got a group of 30 singers. We're going to learn 2 songs with you. You're going to come perform those on our show, and you can do some of your own stuff, and we'll do some of our own stuff, and it'll be awesome. Now what happens? Well, because they're getting to perform, they're going to tell all of their fans about the show. All their fans are going to buy tickets and show up at the show. And most importantly, all of their fans who are supporters of them are going to see you perform with them. Not just you perform on the same show, but actually perform with the symphony. All of that's wonderful. But what's the best part of this? What do symphony people know? They know music. They already read sheet music. They already play instruments. They are already musicians. It's not that big a leap to think that a few of them might want to try singing too. And they're already trained. They might not be trained singers, but they're trained musicians. So you can recruit them over time to become members of your group as well. I had a personal experience very much like this. I was performing as a member of the quartet in a performance of The Music Man locally in the Seattle area. And between scenes, when we weren't rehearsing, most of the other male members of the cast wanted to hang out with us and sing tags because we were singing tags, and they just thought it was cool, right? And they're all musical theater geeks. And then they started coming to our chorus rehearsals and so on and so forth. So just because there's no singing musicians in a community doesn't mean that there aren't musicians in a community. We'll touch to that same point. I'll touch on this in the recruiting class. Where's a great place to go find people who are social and love to sing? Come on, it's easy. Karaoke night, right? Well, what happens when you go to karaoke night? Well, this is what happens. You take your best singing quartet. You go to karaoke night on Monday night or whenever it is. You got a room full of people who like to socialize. Yeah, maybe they like to drink a little bit, but they like to socialize and they like to sing. They're essentially telling you, I could be playing softball socially or soccer socially or curling socially, but I've decided I like to sing socially instead. What do? You sign up your quartet to sing a song. Don't put down any particular song that you're going to sing because you don't need the backing track anyway, right? When the DJ says, hey, you're up. Oh, wait, you didn't write a song down here. What did you want? You say, don't worry about it. Just turn the mic on. You sing your one song. You get off the stage. You drop off your cards for your chorus. And you tell people as you sit around with them afterwards, you can do that too. This is a sport for everybody. And anybody can do what we just did. Come on out to the rehearsal. We'll show you how. Right? I have a ton of ideas like this when we get to the growing your chapter class on where to go find the right people, because we and I mean the collective we of barbershoppers, we do a pretty bad job of recruiting in general, and we often target the wrong people or the wrong environments in which to recruit. And I've got a bunch of ideas to help you do a better job with that. Tina, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. The comment you made about having performers on your show and actually learning a song with them. Now, in the past, whenever we have like other barbershop choruses or quartets, yes, we would learn a song with that chorus, but we've had musical guests on our shows. We've had a children's choir. We invited one choir that couldn't make it, but at one time we did, or like a musical bebop guy band, like that kind of group. And never in a million years did I think that we should have learned a song with them. Why is that? Why? I thought we should learn one with a barbershop chorus, but never with this other group. So that seems to me like that would have been a really awesome idea. So I'll remember that. But,
Sure.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, some of that I think just stems from not snobbishness per se, but there's a lot of barbershoppers who say, well, I only want to sing barbershop. And I think that's a huge, huge missed opportunity, not only for sort of, personal exploration and learning and whatever, but it's also a huge missed opportunity from the point of view of creating connections in the arts community where you live, in creating connections to other groups whose members might, be interested in joining your group if they knew more about you, or supporting your group, or encouraging people they know to consider joining your group, etc. And so I really think that no chapter should consider themselves a 100% barbershop only chapter unless they only exist to compete. Because there's such a wealth of wonderful non-barbershop music out there that if you're willing to sing it once in a while, can really open some doors for you to appear on other people's shows, or to just learn some new singing skills. Or, I mean, there's a lot of difficult, barbershop's tough, don't get me wrong, especially if you're a baritone. But it's, who is it? Deke Sharon says, it's the, he's got a phrase, what is it? Barbershop is the black belt of choral singer, something. He says something like that, that basically barbershop's really hard. And he's not wrong, but there's also lots of other difficult things to sing, types of singing to perform, genres to perform, that can expand our skills as singers if we're willing to explore them. That doesn't mean we have to abandon barbershop. What if 80% of the repertoire is barbershop, but the other 20% is the stuff that 20-year-olds really like? Okay, well, now maybe you'll do a better job of attracting 20-year-olds to your chapter, right? We'll touch on that more in another class, repertoire selections. But I can tell you, I'll give you this little nugget, that when a chapter says to me, yeah, we've recently modernized our repertoire, we've moved up to songs by, the Beach Boys and the Beatles and things like that, I just start laughing. Because you're talking about songs that were popular in the 1960s, which is how many years ago? 60 years ago, right? That's not modernizing. That is, arguably, if you want to attract any person under 40 years of age, you need to be singing songs written that were popular since the year 2000, right? The year 2000, not that long ago. But that's the music made in 2000 and later. That is the music that people under 40 know, and that is stuck in their brains, basically. Other questions that I can answer? Yes, I don't know how to pronounce your name, and I'm going to get it all wrong.
Dinika.
Dinika. Yes.
Yeah. So you said make a great product and recruitment will be easy. For me, it feels like then the product has to be really clear what the product is.
Absolutely.
Because that's probably our big problem. What is the product for us now at the moment? What do we really send out to be the product?
Sure. Well, and I think coming out of these sessions, I anticipate from what Lisa has told me that the leadership or the chorus as a whole is going to want to think about what you've learned, do some exercises. One of the, I can't remember, am I doing the vision class, Lisa?
No, I don't think that's on the list.
Is it not on the list? I can't remember. I'll give you the material regardless.
Okay.
But I have a class that I do called What's Your Vision? And it's basically, it takes a chapter through figuring out what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah,
which is not to say you're not. Oh, I am doing that class. Okay, great. Well, that one is going to be, I think, very beneficial for you because it's going to force you to really examine, well, what do we want to be? And more importantly, what do we not want to be? Recognizing that you can't do everything. What are the things that you're going to intentionally give up and choose not to do or choose not to be good at so that you can put more time and effort and emphasis into being really good at some other things? And again, good doesn't necessarily mean good at contest, although that might be a choice you make, right? Good could be, we want to be the best chapter there is at raising donations for homeless people in our community, right? Now, I'm just making that up, but that could be a goal for a chapter, right? That could be a purpose-driven chapter, and that all of the things that they do, all of the performances that they do, all the efforts that they put in are all about sort of this charity fundraising thing, right? Now, to the question, they've figured out what they want to be. They've chosen a fairly narrow focus, which makes it really easy to then try to recruit members and say, look, this is who we are and this is what we want to do. And if you like this, come join us because you're going to freaking love it. But if that's not what you're interested in, you probably shouldn't join us because you're not going to have a very good time, because this is who we are and this is what we do, right? So having that really clear identity, that really clear persona, I think is absolutely beneficial to any chapter in trying to recruit. There's in my industry, in the software industry, and I guess you'd say more fundamentally in the startup world, there's a concept, and we'll get into this in the What's Your Vision class. There's a concept called an elevator pitch. The idea that during an elevator ride, I can explain to you the idea for my business. So that generally means one or at most two sentences, 25 words or less. You want to get to a place where you could walk up to somebody and say, I'm with Chorus X and we are, or we do Y, whatever it is. It has to be that short, that easy, that simple for people to understand, right? And maybe there's other elements that you don't talk about, but you want to get, you end up needing this essentially marketing phrase, right? That if you can get to that place of understanding among your membership, among your leadership, it's going to be easier to recruit, because then you have a message that you can take anywhere and share with anyone. And it may not be the right fit for them, but at least they know what you're about and they can infer what you're not about because you didn't mention it, right? Like your mission statement is not going to say we eat donuts on Tuesdays. You probably do, but you're not going to say that part because it's a lesser included idea, right? You're going to talk about, we sing good, or we do this thing, or whatever it is you do. And if anybody ever says, hey, I'm interested, but I also like donuts, then you can say, oh yeah, we have donuts too, but that's not our primary purpose for existing. All right, other questions?
That's a guy thing.
What's that? Donuts is a guy thing?
Yeah, the cookies and the donuts. We know that.
Oh. All right. What is it? What does your chapter eat?
Yeah. No. You guys that we helped out at the men's course, and their big thing was their cookie break. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I always laughed. Or donuts or whatever.
Or donuts.
Anyway,
yeah.
We don't get food very often.
Ours is Boston pizza and wine.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Cactus cut fries at Boston Pizza, please.
Yeah.
So love them. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions? What can I answer for you?
Anybody?
Oh, come on. There's got to be more.
Hi, Chris. I'm Cindy. I first of all just wanted to thank you for this great evening, and you're just a wealth of information. And so many times I'm saying in my head, yeah, that's exactly what we tried one time, and yeah, we went down that road. So just really appreciate your thoughts. Looking at the 24, 25 people here tonight, 24, I guess, I'm seeing that over 50% of us are retired.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of interesting with our demographics.
Sure.
Here's a question for you. If you were to describe, you've gotten to know us through Lisa and a bit tonight. If you were to describe our little chorus to another chorus that you're speaking to, how would you describe us?
Well, so things I know about you are that you have had certainly since Lisa's been directing and possibly earlier, there's definitely been a focus on contest. That as choruses go, you skew more toward the yes, we want to compete, yes, we want to prepare for competition side of the spectrum than the choruses that do not. So I would certainly, if someone were asking me, well, should I consider joining them? I'd say, well, do you want to go to contests? Do you want to prepare for contests? There's a certain expectation around the effort that individuals, participants in the chorus will put into that, right? To try to sing at a certain level and improve over time. So that's definitely what I perceive as an element of your identity, if you will. It would be easy for me, knowing sort of what the average age of your membership is, to describe you as well as an aging chorus. Now, that might sound unfair. I don't mean it in the sense of less capable. I mean it in the sense that because of the average age, or let's say spectrum of ages, the average range of your membership, you're likely to be less attractive to, let's say, a 20-year-old potential member. Again, what I was saying before, right? Try to recruit people that are about 10 years younger than yourselves. So I think for your chapter, as you think about recruitment, regardless of, through all this process, regardless of what identity you ultimately choose, when you think about recruitment in the future, you're going to want to think as well, okay, how can we target, and I'll choose a number here, how can we target more 50-year-olds to join the chorus? Then you get the 50-year-olds to recruit the 40-year-olds, and you just keep working your way down over time, right? Because if you just go after the 20-year-olds, you're not as likely to be successful, and you're going to get disappointed with the results, which can bring your own energy level down around recruiting. You want to have successes in recruiting. You don't want to have failures in recruiting, right? So let's recruit in the ways that can make you successful so that it kind of builds on itself over time. I perceive you to be a fun chorus. I mean, everybody showed up and read stuff. I didn't know about the the guideline, but fortunately I kind of had a red shirt on. I mean, clearly you're a chapter, a chorus that likes to enjoy itself. Because of some information that Lisa shared with me, I know that you're a chorus that performs a lot. Like, I was really surprised at how often you sing. My impression, maybe I misunderstood this, but it sounds like you're out singing in public almost once a month on average. That's
sorry, I kind of questioned that before. I don't see us as a huge performing chorus. I don't know.
Well, I know you, at least from what Lisa's described to me, you have a whole bunch of events that occur with regularity, you know, annual outings to what is it? You do the national anthem before some horse races. You have a bunch of other things that are recurring. One of the questions I asked her is, well, how often do you host your own shows? And it sounded like that's a less frequent occurrence, that as a chapter, you're hosting less often than most chapters do. Most chapters are hosting at least one show a year, pretty much guaranteed, and sometimes two, whereas you're hosting maybe every other year, which is definitely lower on the frequency scale for hosting. But I also had the impression that you do perform out in public with regularity, whether it's, you know, at a senior citizen facility or a free gig or whatever it might be, that you're getting out certainly every other month, if not almost every month. Now, that could be averaged, right? It might be in the summer months, you're singing 3 weeks in a row, and then you have a month off. But if you're doing 12 performances a year, you're well above average for most chapters in the men's or the women's organization.
I think keeping in mind too that we have a mandate with our government grants to perform, and a certain amount that are free concerts as well. I believe, Lisa.
Well, but every one of those is a public performance. Every one of those is both an opportunity to recruit new members, but it's also an obligation for potential members, right? They need to understand what they're signing up for. And sure, not everybody's going to be at every performance, and allow some schedule flexibility, whatever. But that is, if you're going to continue to do that because you want to continue getting the government grants, then that becomes an element of your chapter's identity, right? Is that yes, we sing in public and we do it fairly regularly and we like it, right? I mean, I hope you like it. Hope you don't hate it while you're doing it anyway. But that would be an element of who you are. And so that is another a component that I would describe, right? Maybe if someone were to come to me and say, I have tremendous stage fright and I would never be comfortable on stage in front of an audience, but I like singing in the shower, I might not send them to your chapter. I might send them to another chapter that performs far less frequently, as an example, where they're going to be more comfortable as they learn to overcome that stage fright versus, getting chucked in the deep end right to start.
Right, I was telling Chris about some of our regular gigs that we did, such as the Derby, the zoo in the summertime. These performances that pay us fairly well, as almost as much as we do for a show, and then as well as the corporate and the Christmas performances and stuff. If you really think about it, the numbers are close to that. 10, 12 performances a year.
Thanks, Chris.
Oh, sure. Now, there's an interesting corollary to that, which is something that you all need to be thinking about as you're sort of, when we get to the visioning exercise and whatnot, and the identity of the chorus as well, is I've pointed out to you the critical nature of time and limited access to time that potential members, and even all of you, frankly, have. So one of the struggles that I see some chapters have in trying to recruit is that they present themselves as, we do all of this stuff, because they think that if they show you a huge menu from which to choose, that one of those things will be attractive and the member will stick around because they saw something on the menu that looks tasty, right? The problem is when you show them a huge menu, you're also telling them, and we're going to take up a lot of your time, because they sort of assume, even if you don't tell them out loud, they're going to assume, well, if I'm a member of this group, I got to do all that stuff, right? So you may need to find ways to balance the number of things that you participate in, the time requirements on your members, and their ability to really do that and still be successful or to be happy. I mean, we all get this, right? If somebody tried to join your chapter who was, let's say, in college and busy studying all the time, their availability to learn their music on the side, in their spare time, their ability to show up for performances, whatnot, is going to be fairly limited. And if you want to attract that person into your chapter, you have to be okay with the fact that their participation level may be different than some of your other members. That leads to a decision. Well, is part of our identity, you've got to be able to participate at this level. So anyone else who comes in who can't, we're going to send them to the chapter down the street, because they're not going to be successful here with us. I'm going to make an assumption that any chorus that finishes first at international has pretty high participation requirements of their members. And that if you can't do that, the thing they're going to tell you is you probably should sing with the other group down the street, because we're not lowering our participation requirements because we want to be first, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying that, but they also have to be willing to be honest about what their requirements are with prospective members, and then encourage those people not to leave Barbershop, but instead go find the place that is the right fit for them. Other questions?
I had a question. This is Joanne. Another description of our chorus is that we're very involved in Sweet Online politics. I guess that's the word to use. Since our inception, what, 15, 16, I can't remember, years ago, we have always had at least one member on the RMT and on the regional education faculty. At least.
That's great.
So yeah, we are very involved.
Well,
outside of our chorus too.
Sure, and that might be an important thing to say. That maybe you have this today already, maybe you don't. But if there's a sort of a potential member cheat sheet, you might want to just have bullet points that say, this is what we are, this is what we're not, whatever those things might be. And maybe one of those bullet points on what we are is, our members are very involved, not just in the chapter, but at the regional and international level. We intentionally seek out people for whom, frankly, Barbershop is going to be or is going to become a lifestyle. Now, that's both a good and bad statement, right? It's a good statement because you're really clearly saying, hey, we want folks that fit in this pretty tight, small box, so everybody else can sort of self-select out of it. But it also is going to make it harder to recruit because there's fewer of those people. right? We go back to that pyramid of participation. There's lots and lots of social barbershoppers down here, but the folks that are going to put in the time and effort required to either sing at a top 10 level or to be a chapter leader or to be on an RMT, etc. There's fewer and fewer of those people as you work your way up the pyramid, right? The harder it is to do that job or to do that, accomplish that thing, the smaller the number of people that are willing to do it or have the ability to do it, the time, the finances, etc. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, hey, that's who we are. If you imagine, let's say, a really high quality singing, traveling octet, right? Professional singers. You only get to be a part of that group if you're willing to commit at the level that they need you to commit, because they're way up here, right, at that sort of Olympic level. So not everybody can do that job, right? Not everybody, even if they're an exceptional singer, not everybody's willing to give up the income they're making from their day job today so they can go travel the country 350 days a year to just be a professional singer and probably get paid less, frankly, but do it for the love of it or do it for the future benefit they might derive in a musical career. So I applaud any specificity that you can bring to your identity, because I really think it helps both you as an existing chorus to say, here's who we are, here's the things that we value, this is what we care about and what we want to be good at, versus here's the things that we maybe don't care about but care less about, the things we're not going to try as hard to be good at, right? Maybe you decide that for time commitment reasons, you want to focus really hard on being good at contest, but for the mental sanity and time commitments of your members, that means you're going to perform in public less. You're going to give up something else to make room for that thing that you want to pursue. And I'm just making this up. You might not make that decision, but so many of our chapters really try to be all things and aren't very good at any of them. And again, I don't mean good in the contest score sense. I mean good for their members. I mean really truly satisfying for their members in the things that they say they want to be. So let's do less. And I mean this generally, not specific to you, but just in general, I think barbershop choruses, period, forget about barbershop, right? That all volunteer-based social activities should be looking for ways to reduce the time commitment so that more people can participate. But that also means probably narrowing their focus some and doing fewer things, but doing them better. And it's an unfortunate but true fact of the world in which we live now versus 50 years ago. Other questions? Linda?
I just have one, yeah. Because we're such a small chorus, we've lost several members over these last 8 months. In your experience, is it harder or easier for a bigger chorus to recruit people or for a smaller chorus to recruit people?
I don't think it's a function of size. It would be easy to imagine that if you have 100 people in your chorus and they're all working on recruiting, you're going to have an easier time recruiting people. But first of all, not all of your 100 members are actually going to be very good recruiters or active recruiters. There are people who are attracted to large choruses. There are people who are attracted to small choruses. So there's just so many factors that go into being successful at recruiting that I don't think it's necessarily a function of size. There's a guy here in the Seattle area who literally recruited 37 new members into his chapter in about a 14-month period by himself, because he's good at recruiting and he was tenacious as heck. Nobody else in his chapter brought anybody in, but he took a chapter of about 12 people and added 37 to it in 14 months by himself. Now, would it have mattered if that was a 100-person chapter or a 5-person chapter? Probably not, because he did it all himself, right? So I don't think that the size of the chapter really makes a difference with respect to your ability to recruit. Certainly, the size of the chapter can have an influence on what you can offer to a potential member, right? If you're a 12-person chapter, the kind of show that you're going to put on may be more or less appealing to someone than the kind of show that a 50-person chapter can put on. But I think that if you're a 12-person chapter, then you need to, I like to use this phrase a lot, you need to decide what you want to be when you grow up, and you need to be working toward that goal, and you need to be recruiting people who have the same interest in that goal, because then they're going to help you to get there. They're going to be working with you, all pushing in the same direction. If you're recruiting people who don't have that same goal, then they're just along for the ride and they're not really helping you. Other questions? I'm not seeing any hands, although I'm not sure if I can see everybody.
Yeah, I keep looking too. Yeah.
Jump back and forth.
Okay, so we live in a city where there are, a city of just less than 1 million people. So it's quite a size, but
Sure.
there are 2 choruses with very similar focuses. Let's say we've got very different personalities, but very similar focuses. So we are looking for the same people. I guess you would say. Is there something, other than we've always focused on, the personality that we are and the people that we are? Is there I guess what is my question?
Well, so I think I understand your question. So let me kind of pull it apart a little bit.
Yeah.
When you say there's 2 choruses that are sort of similar in their, I'll say, goals, let's examine that.
Yes.
Are both choruses trying to sing at a particular quality level?
Yes, I believe we are.
Okay. Are both choruses interested in competing?
Yes.
Like genuinely interested in competing? Okay. Are either of the choruses, and this speaks more to sort of personality, do either of the choruses have a sort of known element of personality? And it could be they always wear red, they only perform in clown suits, they're heavily involved in civic works, they always perform joint shows with the symphony. Is there any elements of sort of uniqueness or personality that either of the 2 choruses have today?
That differentiate them? I struggle with finding what that is.
Okay. Then
Could I just make a comment?
Yes,
yeah,
please.
of course.
As the newest member to your chorus and a new person to Edmonton, I reached out to the other chorus several times. Never heard back.
Wow.
Ever. You guys reached out once. You were so welcoming. So to me, even though you guys are maybe the same goal-oriented, competing, singing well, etc., you guys to me are the heart. And that's why you're called Heartland. So to me, that is a really big difference. You're fun, you're welcoming, which is a really big thing for me, and I'm sure other potential members, is that you are welcoming and fun.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that's when I talk about personality, that's, that has always been our goal, and that is who we certainly plan to be.
So that could be, and you'll have to decide as a chorus, but I spoke earlier, and we're going to get into this in the visioning exercise, about trying to find a unique persona for yourselves. And maybe an element of your persona is, we're the fun chorus. And you don't have to say, those gals are not the fun chorus. You never have to say that out loud. You can just say, we're the fun chorus. And the implication is other choruses aren't fun. Right? Now, the goal there is not to denigrate the other chorus. The goal is simply to tell people, we're the fun chorus. You want to have fun, come join us. Right? You're not saying they're not fun. You're just saying we're the fun chorus. Right? And so trying to find unique aspects that will help you create a public persona, an impression that you can leave with people. It is, you know, I spoke before about this concept of an elevator pitch, sort of 1 or 2 sentences max, 25 words max to describe yourselves. You wouldn't walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm with Alberta Heartland Chorus, and we like to have fun," because that's not enough information. I mean, yeah, sure, everybody likes to have fun, but that's not enough information to describe your chorus in 1 or 2 sentences to potentially attract that person to wanting to sing with you, right? So you might say, well, we like to have fun singing, or we like to compete, and or we have fun competing, right? There's a whole bunch of ways that you can take the fun part and work it into other elements of your persona and who and what you want to be, to end up in a place that you can still have a fairly short, kind of pithy sentence that gets to the core of what are we, right? And then somebody can be like, well, do you do X? And you can be like, no, we don't do that, if it's a no thing, right? Or yeah, sure, we do that too, whatever it might be, but it's not your central focus, right? What is, like, I'm not saying you have to have one and only one reason to exist, but you want to understand what is your first reason for existing, what's your second and maybe third reason for existing, and all the other reasons really don't matter, because you're going to want to put most or all of your energy into making those 1 or 2 or 3 reasons for existing be the very best that they can be, so that you're attracting people who want those things, who will get on board with you and help push you toward being the very best of those 3 things that you can, because they're personally motivated about it, right? It is, it's easy to attract, or well, it's generally easy to attract members who won't put in a lot of effort if you haven't created a unique identity for yourselves. If you're just generic chorus number 7, it's easy to attract generic members to your chorus, because you're not asking them to be particularly selective about whether they really fit in your chorus or not. But if you're really specific chorus number 5, you know, again, I'll use this example. I think there should be a chorus that literally only ever performs in clown suits. I don't care if it's a holiday show. I don't care if you're performing at a funeral, you only perform in clown suits. Now, you're only going to get people to join who want to perform in clown suits, but every person who joins really wants to perform in clown suits. So your membership may not be huge, but boy, are they going to be dedicated, right? Sure, it's a goofy example, but that is that type of persona, that type of intent behind a chapter that can really lead to being able to recruit strong, high quality members into the chapter. And high quality doesn't mean necessarily great singers. It just means people whose interests are really well aligned with the goals and intent of the chorus itself. I'll tell this very brief story. In my world, in the software world, we refer to what's called qualified and unqualified customers. So if I tell a marketing person, go get me 1 million customers, they'll go get me 1 million people who might buy my product and continue to pay for it for 2 or 3 months, but they're going to peel away. They're what we would call unqualified customers. They're not very good long-term lifetime type customers. If I instead tell that marketing person, go get me customers without setting a number, go get me customers who are going to stay with my product for 3 years or more, who are going to have an average lifetime value of $300, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, they're going to bring me fewer people, but those are going to be highly qualified customers who are going to be proponents of my product. They're going to tell all their friends about my business and how great it is, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So there's a phrase I use a lot. measurement drives behavior. If you measure the wrong things, you're going to get the wrong results because you're encouraging people to behave in bad ways or ways that don't benefit you, right? So if as a barbershop chorus, if the thing you're measuring is how many people I have on the risers, you're going to end up with lots of people on the risers, but they may not be the types of singers you want. They may not be the types of, have the level of dedication that you want, because you're possibly measuring the wrong thing. Now, if your goal is just to create the largest social singing chorus you can, then bodies on risers is actually a good measurement. It's going to drive the right behavior. Recruit as many people as you can. Keep that door open all the time. Be super welcoming. Don't do anything to scare them away. Okay, now you got 100 people on the risers. The singing may not be great, but you got 100 people on the risers. Goal achieved, right? But if the goal is we want super dedicated, hardcore, type A personality, A-level singers, and a really intense elite chorus, then what you want to measure is how many intense type A, almost professional singers are we recruiting? Now, you're going to recruit a very small number of people. It's going to be over a long period of time. It's going to be hard to do. You're going to have to go to very specific places like rob people from the college music programs, things like that. But you're going to have a chorus that is bringing in the right people for what it is you want to be. So think about what it is what are your measurements of success? Because what you call success is going to directly influence what you do to achieve that. And that could be good or bad influence.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Thank you.
Oh, sure. My pleasure. What else can I answer? How are we doing on time, Lisa? I don't know exactly how late you wanted to go tonight.
Yeah, we've got about 8 minutes left. And I know Cindy wanted to take a picture of everyone.
Okay.
So I'm going to take you off spotlight to do that. So we have everybody in the frame.
Quick, straighten up the hair.
Take the mute off here. Everybody knows the drill. Chris, I'll fill you in on the drill.
Okay.
You got to smile and lean in.
Oh, okay.
We're all doing hearts.
We like happy pictures.
Sure.
So I am going to, now everyone's doing a heart except me because I can't do both at the same time here. So I'll take a few pictures, put your happy face on.
That's not exactly right. I guess I got to get my thumbs down here.
Okay, that one was too many eyes are closed, so we're gonna try again. And okay, here is take 2. Much better. Good job, everybody.
All right. Sorry, I should have shaved. I didn't know we were taking pictures. I got it ready. I mean, COVID, I just, I work from home every day. And so why shave? There's not much. Well, plus Judy's gone. At least I would shave for her, but she's gone for 6 weeks. So I have no reason to even put on clothes for the most part to go to work now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that. All right, so we got a few minutes left. Other questions or anything that anybody wants, me to address in future classes that maybe I didn't touch on here? We are going to do we're going to do a vision focused class. So, what's your vision, your mission, etc. We're going to do a growing your chapter class, which is all about recruitment. And what are we doing? The marketing.
The next class we're doing is purposeful inclusion.
Oh, the inclusion class. We're probably not doing the marketing one, right? So in the next class, the inclusion class, I'll be telling you all about it. Quite a lot of the class is simply understanding inclusion, what it means to be inclusive. And then toward the back end of the class, I talk about specifics in the barbershop world, specifics to chapters and things like that. But there's a good portion of just simply education around terminology and things like that. I'm going to show some videos. So for example, you'll come away from that class with a much better understanding of, what does the term white privilege mean, or privilege in general. You'll have a better understanding of how media portrayals of people of color can subconsciously influence us to have certain beliefs, to behave in certain ways, and what we need to do to move around that, to overcome that, and whatnot. And we'll get into a fair amount of detail around how can you create a more inclusive environment in your chapter, in your course rehearsals, etc.
Excellent.
I'll have to look. I can't remember for the 90-minute version of that. I'm not sure that I'm able to do all of the videos that I like to include. So you may end up with a homework video or two to watch on your own after the class.
Okay.
Probably like 10 minutes worth of video or something like that. But I can give you links to it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris. That was
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
an informative evening. Yes.